Hey everyone, you're watching GamerBrain, and let's look at the 5 strangest Japanese video games of all time. Number 5. Zombie Nation. Developed by Kazi in 1991 for the original Nintendo, Zombie Nation is without a doubt the weirdest zombie game that you've most likely never played. It has a small but loyal cult following of gamers who are willing to pay more than $400 just for a used copy. If you want to know how strange this game is, let me put it to you this way. You are the floating head of a resurrected samurai warrior, and the first boss of the game is the Statue of Liberty with snakes on her head. So yeah, it's that kind of game. In the original Japanese version, you play as a cool-looking samurai warrior mask, but they changed it to some fat guy's head for the American release. The head you control shoots fire from its mouth and eyes, while also being able to fly in all directions. It's really funny watching this giant blob of a head fight against the National Army, as well as against a wide variety of colourful fantasy creatures too. You would think that you would mainly fight against zombies, like the name implies, but you actually save zombie hostages in exchange for weapon power-ups. There are also boss stages that make absolutely no sense at all, like an old naked muscle man with an affinity for throwing axes. Why, you ask? Because Japan, that's why. Not many people pay attention to the story, but it's actually the weirdest part of all. In the year 1999, an alien named Dark Seed crashes in the Nevada desert and turns the United States into zombie slaves. At the same time, a legendary sword awakens you, a great samurai spirit by the name of Namakubi. To clear up one of the most common misconceptions about this game, you are a holographic image, not a severed head like most people think. Obviously, this made much more sense to Kazi's storyboard team at the time, who may or may not have been overdosing on drugs when they created this game. Overall, Zombie Nation's gameplay is extremely fast-paced and frantic. Stuff comes flying at you from all sides, and you don't have much time to react. But the controls are good enough to the point where if you die, it probably really was your fault and not the game's. Sometimes the graphics flicker when there's a lot of action though. Not many people can keep up with this game for long enough to become good at it. It's definitely a unique challenge that's worth playing if you like weird games from Japan, but probably on an emulator as opposed to the NES, unless you were rich. If you've ever been wondering what it's like to become a mosquito and spend an entire summer draining the blood from a poor, unfortunate family, then you most likely have some serious psychological problems. Fortunately for you, Japan completely understands your desire to become a blood-sucking bug, which is why they let you scratch this strange itch with Mr. Mosquito. Developed in 2001 by Zoom for the PlayStation 2, the main objective of Mr. Mosquito is to suck increasingly larger and larger amounts of blood from each member of the Yamada family without them noticing. Each level is a different member of the family hanging out in a different room of the house. The Yamadas all look like giants, and their footsteps boom as they stomp around. You try and stay out of sight for the most part, and wait for the right moment to strike as they go about their day. They watch television, cook in the kitchen, and of course, the Japanese women take long hot baths while listening to smooth jazz. Each Yamada family member has a specific part of their body that you need to aim for. If they hear or see you at any point during the level, the game switches into a cool battle mode where you have to bite them on what the game calls relax points. These are clearly marked red points that you have to aim for while avoiding their clapping hands and cans of bug spray. If you manage to hit all of their relax points in time, they'll forget about you and go back to their normal routine. Otherwise, it's game over. Once you land on them, a new box comes up in the upper right-hand corner that shows you needling your nose deep into their skin. This switches into a mini-game mode where 2 side-by-side meters appear at the bottom left of the screen. The blue bar on the left represents your victim's stress level, and the red bar on the right is the amount of blood that you have stolen. You drink blood by rotating the right stick in a circle. The faster you rotate, the faster you suck blood, but the quicker the stress meter fills up. You can suck blood even faster by holding R3 and pushing up on the left stick at the same time, but this causes the stress meter to fill up too. The trick is to try and match your stick rotations with a bouncing ball in the center of the stress meter. If the blue meter fills all the way, you get swatted, and it's a one-hit death too, unlike the battle mode, which takes a few hits to kill you. The 3D graphics and controls are really good for their time, and the classic lounge music just adds to the insanity. The game has good atmosphere as well. It uses an exaggerated cartoon style that will still leave you feeling itchy just from watching the animations. Overall, Mr. Mosquito did really well in Japan and became the 5th best-selling game in the entire country after its first week. Americans also liked it enough for it to obtain a quirky cult classic status. Not too bad for a game about being an annoying mosquito of all things. Number 3. Katamari Damacy. What if you wrote a school paper that was so good that you got paid to develop it into a video game? That's exactly what happened to Keita Takahashi with Katamari Damacy for the PlayStation 2. Well, to be fair, it's not like he was a high school student or something when it happened. He was already enrolled in a Japanese video game developing school called the Namco Digital Holiday Game Library. This institute was owned by Namco, and every year they would hire 30 students to develop games for a living. Keita's game was one of their biggest success stories. Katamari Damacy, which translates into Soul of a Clump, was his thesis paper. It was about a little green alien called the Prince of the Cosmos, who is looking after his clumsy father, the King of the Cosmos. Basically, your godlike father gets drunk, although this part is removed from the American versions, and destroys the universe overnight, and now it's time for you to be a good son and clean up his mess. How do you do this? Simple, you just have to roll everything back into a giant ball and turn them into stars, that's all. You play a little green guy with a rectangular head who literally rolls everything into a giant ball as you move him around the world. He starts the game on a table collecting tiny objects such as dice and thumbtacks, but by the end, he is rolling up huge mountains and skyscrapers. There's something immensely satisfying about rolling everything in the world into a huge ball. There's not really enemies, but most levels require you to reach a certain size within a time limit. Other levels require you to hunt for specific items and collect a certain amount before you can continue. The game offers a very rudimentary physics engine that decides the size of the item and whether it will fit into your ball or knock other things off it instead. It was a big deal at the time. The point of all this collecting is to sacrifice everything that you've rolled up into a ball in order to make the stars again. Even though you have spent the entire game collecting people, animals, buildings, and even clouds and rainbows, now you need to destroy them to recreate the universe. That's really morbid now that I think about it. Does it make sense? Not really. Is it weird and fun? Without a doubt. It's one of those just one more level kind of games. You're usually playing just to see what new crazy objects and settings will come next. Nobody expected for Katamari Damacy to become so successful, perhaps least of all Keita himself. With just a 10-man team and a modest $1 million budget, Keita struck a home run on his first try and made one of the most ridiculously original titles that the world has ever seen. While other games focused on violence and competition, Keita wanted to make a game that could encourage people to stop wanting to fight. For the first time in quite a while, players were playing a game that brought them together without the traditional violence and competition, and that type of gameplay is probably as original as the game's story. Without getting too idealistic, Katamari Damacy in many ways represented Keita's own philosophy on life in general. Katamari Damacy is literally a game about everything in the universe coming together, and that's what he wanted people to do. This is how he himself felt about the game industry too. He once said in an interview that he was tired of video game companies suing each other over trademarks. Instead, he thinks that technology is, quote, something that should be shared. Here we are in the 21st century, he said, and I think we could be doing a lot more if we used our minds to move forward rather than keep dwelling on who owns what. It figures that such a unique mind would create such an original game. Number 2. Arm Champs. Leave it to Japan to figure out a way to arm wrestle with an arcade machine. Arm Champs 1 is very rare. Jaylico only made 83 of these machines in the 1980s. Then they came out with Arm Champs 2 in 1992, and that game was the one that really took off. When you saw that Terminator-looking arm sticking straight out at you at the arcade, there was no way you were going to say no. I mean, here was your chance to literally arm wrestle a robot. The quarters in your pocket never stood a chance. You started out by selecting a difficulty level in the form of a weight class option. Then you would select an opponent and get to work. Arm Champs 2 had a wide variety of crazy looking characters to wrestle against. There was a Russian female bodybuilder, a retired soldier from Egypt, professional boxers, sumo wrestlers, and even a robot that looked like RoboCop. You had to pin their arm down for 3 full seconds while a referee counted. The game gave you one rematch if you lost, but that was it. Adults could handle this game easily, but it was still pretty tough for kids, which is who the game was primarily marketed for. What was really cool and original about Arm Champs was how the characters' facial expressions matched your performance. They'd get cocky when they were winning, and start to worry once they began to lose. It was fun to see the different personalities from each character. Only a few other games, like Mike Tyson's Punch-Out!, put this degree of effort into the characters' reactions at the time, and it really made for a rewarding experience. The best one has to be when the robot would say "no way" in a classic 90s computer voice when you started beating him. His real name was Specs, but all the kids knew that he was RoboCop. In 2007, a publisher named Atlas made a knockoff title called Arm Sprint. This game has 10 levels and also features a cast of funny characters, including a French maid, a drunk kung fu master, and even a small chihuahua. But if you ever saw this game in arcades, be glad that you never gave it a try. And if you ever did get a chance to play it, consider yourself lucky you made it out unharmed. Arm Sprint was recalled after 3 separate incidents where players managed to somehow break their arms. Now you can only find the game in Japan, where the arcade audience is still hardcore enough to go out on a limb for the games they love. Number 1. Boong-ga Boon-ga. Okay, honestly, where to even begin with this one? First of all, this game is from Korea, but it was made especially for Japanese arcades, so it's still technically okay to put on this list. Second of all, this game has a mascot that is supposed to be a piece of crap holding a piece of crap on a stick while wearing pajamas with pieces of crap on them. I could really just end the list here without explaining any more, but here's the deal with Boong-ga Boon-ga. The game's title literally translates into Spankum Spankum, and that's exactly what you are supposed to do. Whereas Arm Champs has a large arm to play against, Boong-ga Boon-ga has the lower end of someone's backside hanging out. Seriously, I'm not making this up. There is literally a gene-covered fake butt sticking out of the game, and that's what players use as the controller. What are you supposed to do with it? Well, first you select a character, and then you hit them in the butt as hard as you can. You even get to watch the character's reactions on screen as they get pounded. There are many different undesirable characters to smack, including a child molester, an ex-boyfriend, and a mother-in-law. In other words, people that society traditionally hates. Best of all, for some reason the Addams Family theme song plays during the character selection screen, and it's hilarious. I really doubt that they gave permission for this music to be used. Oh South Korea, out of all the countries in the world that would steal music for their butt-slapping game, why did it have to be you? We save you from North Korea, and this is how you repay us? There's another version of Boong-ga Boon-ga that not only has a fake behind, but it also sports a giant plastic hand attachment with a huge pointer finger too. If you want to know how to play this version, just imagine ramming a gas pump as hard as you can into your car's gas tank. No thanks, I think I'll just stick with Arm Champs 2 instead. Thanks for checking out this video. Since you watched the whole thing, I'd really appreciate it if you hit that like button. Subscribe as well if you want, since we upload a new gaming countdown each week. See ya.